Quero saber só como é como é que começa.
Regina, tá me
Oi.
ouvindo?
Tô sim.
Olha só, querida, bom dia.
Bom dia.
Eu vou dar, a Karen vai fazer a abertura, tudo isso. Quando chegar a nossa vez, que ela passar a palavra para mim, eu vou falar brevemente o que é a OCDE, o tema da apresentação da Oriana, etc., só para contextualizar,
Certo.
e vou terminar dizendo que em 2019 o presidente Queiroz e você estiveram na OCDE, num
Isso
evento...
aí.
Bora.
Eu tenho fome de cidadania.
Eu tenho fome de ajudar.
Eu tenho fome de fazer a
I'm
diferença.
hungry for
Eu tenho fome
citizenship.
de levar
I'm
esperança.
hungry
Eu tenho fome de inclusão.
for being able to help. I'm hungry for
O
inclusion.
Mesa Brasil Sesc RJ agradece
Mesa
a
Brasil
todos que colaboram para que
Sesc
essa
RJ
receita
thanks
seja
all
um
the people
sucesso
who
diariamente.
collaborate
Juntos,
to
adicionamos
make
o nosso
our
ingrediente mais
recipes
importante,
work
a
every day,
solidariedade.
helping people through our most important ingredient, solidarity. I'm hungry for tomatoes. I'm hungry for inclusion.
O Mesa Brasil Sesc RJ é uma
Mesa
rede
Brasil
alimentar contra a
Sesc
fome e o
RJ is a
desperdício,
food
que tem
chain
uma receita
against
muito
hunger
simples:
and food waste.
promover cidadania e
Based
melhoria na
on
qualidade de vida das
citizenship
pessoas,
and
levando
improving
de quem pode
people's
doar
quality
para quem
of life
precisa receber.
by
Uma
donating
verdadeira
to
rede
those who
solidária
really need
que
to
motiva a
receive.
todos.
It's a solidarity chain that motivates and encourages
O que
all.
me traz mais orgulho é saber que o que eu
What
faço
most gives me
traz um impacto
pride
muito positivo
is to know
sobre vidas,
that what I do
né?
creates a very
trabalho muito
positive
gratificante
impact
em
on
saber
lives.
que vai
It's very
chegar
gratifying
alimento
work
sobre
to
a mesa
know
daquele que
that
necessita,
food
daquele que
is going to reach
precisa.
the tables of those who really need it.
O trabalho começa com a
I
ajuda
will
de doadores
start
e
with
empresas
the
parceiras,
help of
que
partner
repassam
companies
ao
and
Mesa Brasil
donors
Sesc
that
RJ
send
os alimentos
to
excedentes ou fora dos
Sesc
padrões de
Brasil,
comercialização,
Mesa
mas que ainda
Brasil,
podem ser
food
consumidos.
that can still be
O FoodBanking
consumed.
procurou a parceria com o Mesa Brasil com o objetivo de diminuir o
We
desperdício
try
de
to
alimentos
reduce
que eram
food
ofertados
waste.
nas lojas. Então, os alimentos que não
So
têm
food
disponibilidade
that
mais comercial
isn't
para venda,
commercially
eles são doados porque eles já
available
são aptos
for
para
sale
consumo.
is donated because it's still
Representa
apt for
conjunto
consumption.
de ações que fortalece a sociedade, uma vez que a gente doa
We
esses alimentos
donate
para a população
this food to the
através do Mesa
population
Brasil,
through
e
Mesa
isso nos
Brasil.
apoia, dando mais
And
força a um dos nossos
we
propósitos, que é cuidar das
strengthen,
pessoas.
boost one of our main motivations, which is to
O
take care
sentimento
of
que eu tenho
people.
em participar de um
I
projeto como esse, o Mesa
feel
no Campo, é um sentimento de gratidão.
Gratitude
A
by
nossa
taking
terra,
part
ela é
in
uma
this
terra
process.
que é fértil.
Our soil
A gente
is
tem muita
fertile.
comida em
We have
abundância, com tantas
many,
pessoas passando
many
fome.
things to give.
A gente não está falando aqui de desperdício
Now,
daquele alimento que foi para o lixo. A gente
we're
está
not
falando de um
talking
alimento
about
bom,
food
que não
waste
foi colhido
that
e que
is
tem sim
rotten.
condições
We
de
are
matar a fome de muitas pessoas,
talking
assim
about
como a gente tem
food
feito
that can
com a
help
nossa cesta de
people
hortifruti.
who
Então, é um
are
orgulho
hungry,
e uma gratidão muito
that
grande
is
poder
fit for
fazer parte desse
consumption.
projeto.
We
Essas
feel great
doações são
gratitude.
selecionadas pelo controle de qualidade do programa,
The program
embaladas
controls
e
quality
encaminhadas para as
and
instituições cadastradas.
sends food
Olhar
to
feito com todo
institutions
cuidado,
that are
carinho e
registered.
dedicação
Everything
dos
is done with
nossos
great
voluntários.
care
Mexer
and
com alimento
dedication
é muito
by our
importante. E a gente
volunteers.
sabe que eles são cuidadosamente separados, que
Deal
eles
with
vão
food,
chegar
very
devidamente
important.
adequados para o consumo.
We
Até
separate
porque
them
quando a gente
and
faz
make them
o que a gente chama de
arrive at the
manipulação,
destination
a gente
fit for
verifica se o alimento
consumption.
está próprio para
We
consumo.
handle the
Então a
food
gente
and see if
faz
it's fit for
trabalho
consumption.
sério,
Our
e eu
work
tenho a
is
certeza
done
que ele
with
vai
a
chegar
lot
à
of
mesa
seriousness
como
and
ele tem que chegar.
to make
Então eu me
quite
sinto
sure
muito
that
honrada de
food
fazer esse
reaches the
trabalho, eu
table
faço
as it
com
should.
orgulho.
O próximo passo
I do my
é
job
distribuir
with
os
pride.
alimentos às
The next
instituições
step
sociais
is to
assistidas,
distribute
como
the
creches,
food
abrigos
to
e casas de
daycare
repouso.
centers
Lá,
and
eles são transformados em refeições
homes,
para quem precisa,
care homes,
reduzindo assim
and
a condição de insegurança alimentar de crianças,
the
jovens,
food has
adultos e
to be
idosos.
safe for consumption and is given to children, youth and the elderly. With the food that we receive, we make savings in our shopping, in the things that we need to buy. For example, recently we bought new tables because we lacked a number of tables, an adequate number of tables. The children needed to study and we didn't have enough chairs and tables for the children. So through our savings we managed to buy these chairs and tables and some toys that the children use in their recreational activities. We managed to use these savings
E para temperar ainda melhor essa
and buy many
iniciativa, o
things.
Mesa Brasil Sesc
Thanks to
RJ
this
leva também
initiative, Mesa
ações que
Brasil
promovem as boas
also carries
práticas de
out
higiene, o
activities
combate ao
to promote
desperdício e o
hygiene
aproveitamento integral dos
based on
alimentos, estimulando assim a
saving
criatividade
food,
na elaboração de
using food.
receitas e cardápios de
We
baixo
create
custo. São
recipes
cursos,
and
oficinas e
through
palestras que multiplicam
using
conhecimento, capacitam os profissionais das instituições atendidas e
and
ainda ajudam
we
a complementar a
help
renda dessas pessoas.
in this way.
Esse movimento integrado ajuda a tirar
This
milhares de
integrated
brasileiros da
approach
situação de
helps
vulnerabilidade
to
todos os
remove
anos. Um trabalho
a
de
great number of
equipe que
Brazilians
ajuda a acabar com
from a
muitas
situation
fomes,
of
como a de
vulnerability
inclusão,
and
cidadania
do away with
e
hunger through
desenvolvimento
inclusion,
social.
citizenship and social
Eu tenho
involvement.
fome de cidadania.
Eu tenho
I'm
fome de
hungry
ajudar.
for
Eu tenho fome de
citizenship.
fazer a
I'm
diferença.
hungry
Eu tenho
to
fome
be
de
able to
levar
help. I'm
esperança.
hungry to
Eu tenho
make
fome de
difference. I'm
inclusão.
hungry for hope, giving hope. I'm hungry for inclusion.
O Mesa Brasil Sesc RJ
Mesa Brasil Sesc
agradece a
RJ
todos que
thanks
colaboram
everyone
para que essa
who
receita
contributes
seja um sucesso
towards making
diariamente.
this recipe
Juntos,
be a
adicionamos
success
o nosso
daily.
ingrediente mais
We
importante,
give our
a
most
solidariedade.
important ingredient, solidarity.
Eu tenho fome de tomate. Eu tenho fome de feijão.
Oi, gente, bom dia.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome to the International Forum Mesa Brasil Sesc RJ. This is the second day of our event. So if you missed the first day, don't be sad because the links are available on our channel and you can look at them, watch again if you are short of time. Thank you very much for choosing to spend time with us today. My name is Karen de Souza. I'm a journalist. I am very proud to be here. And here I am part of this project for a long time. I have interviewed these people in this project many times, so it is a great honor to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. Our meeting started yesterday, as I said before, and we reflected on hunger and food waste, a social challenge. I would like to invite you who are taking part through the chat, and we heard people say they're hungry for tomato and for citizenship. And I would like you to tell us what kind of hunger you feel. And through the chat, I want to tell you that I am hungry for doing what is right. If we live in a society where there is inequality, I like to take part in initiatives like Mesa Brasil. I've put this in the chat, and I'd like to see what you put. Now, as you saw in the video, this work is being undertaken for over 20 years. The formula is simple. Food is taken where it is in excess, and it is given to institutions where it is lacking. There are cooks who are given guidance, and they provide meals that are healthier using these foods in an integrated way. So this is being done now for over 20 years. As I said yesterday, we learned a lot. We had lots of people taking part, great people taking part, and today it won't be any different. Now I'm going to invite the president of FEComércio Rio de Janeiro, Antônio Florencio Queiroz, and he's going to say a few words now. Good morning. Initially, I would like to express my great satisfaction for having your participation here at this event, where we're going to have an exchange of ideas and knowledge on such an important subject, especially in these times. To talk about hunger and food waste, a social challenge, means talking about the challenge that motivates Mesa Brasil Sesc RJ daily. It is a food security and nutritional security program that has now been in place for over 20 years. The program works in many ways by collecting food in perfect conditions for consumption from partners and giving it to donors, registered donors, or promoting educational actors that prioritize the integrated use of the food, or working in different ways in emergencies, always seeking social development and feeding solidarity. Carrying out or deploying solidarity is even more essential in this challenging times. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have doubled our efforts to minimize the effects of hunger in the state of Rio de Janeiro. In order to do this, we called on our partners and established new links with people and companies who embraced our cause and carried on this path with us. We significantly increased the donation of food, and we carried out many new activities, such as the appointing of 20 Mesa Brasil ambassadors who will act as multipliers and reinforce the solidarity chain in the state of Rio de Janeiro. Right from the start of the pandemic till now, Mesa Brasil Sesc RJ has distributed over 3,000 tons of food throughout our state, and we carry on working so this can increase and we can take hope and transform more lives every day. I invite you all to reflect together, and I thank you for your presence and your contribution. Thank you, and welcome to the International Forum Mesa Brasil Sesc Rio de Janeiro. Thank you, President Antônio Queiroz. You've been really welcomed. I hope you feel very much at ease. And our first panel today will have the participation of some very special people. We're going to talk about avoiding the food waste and reaching a and regenerative food system in cities. We invite Regina Pinho from Sesc Rio de Janeiro, and the head of the Department of Water Governance and Circular Economies in Cities, Ms. Oriana Romano. Maria Beatriz as well. Good morning once again. It really is a pleasure to be here. Good morning, Karen. Today is the second day, as usual, saying wonderful words of welcome. Regina, congratulations for this watershed event. Good morning, Oriana. Welcome, Oriana. I'm going to speak very briefly. And Oriana represents the OECD here. And for those of you who don't know, the OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and it provides great synergy and so Sesc and also seeks well-being. Oriana is the head of unit Water Governance and Circular Economy in Cities. And in 2018, Oriana started a circular economy program in cities and regions that provide support to government in developing the implementation of circular economy strategies. We know cities are great consumers of food. In 2050, cities will consume 80% of food. This is a great challenge, and Oriana is going to talk about this today. Regina is going to say words of welcome to Oriana. She's met Oriana before at an OECD event, and Regina is going to explain why. And I hope we all have a great panel success. Now, Regina, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Bia. Good morning, Oriana. Dear Oriana, thank you, Bia. Welcome everyone once again today. As I said yesterday, all of us who are here, this is an important moment, and we feel as Sesc is a social well-being institution, and we feel the need more than ever to reflect and to seek solutions in the fight against hunger and food waste. For an institution such as Sesc that deals with social welfare and well-being, it is a human duty, an institutional duty to come together with all the other institutions across the world. And we work a lot in Brazil. Sesc has the Mesa Brasil that collects foods where it is in excess and takes to it where it is lacking. But we work also in education, in changing habits. Our country, as everyone knows, Brazil is an enormous country with a great territory, a very large territory. We have wonderful agriculture. The whole world receives Brazilian protein and grain. So as Brazilians, it is really our duty to have moments such as these for requesting and asking those who are really part of this to think about hunger. I think, how can we have hunger still? It is a great challenge, but we need to seek solutions so that hunger will one day be totally done away with. Now, if we don't live to see that day, we should work towards having this happen for people who haven't yet, who aren't yet born. Now, can you put my presentation on my screen? In 2019, we went to, I had the joy of going to the OECD with our president, Antonio Queiroz, who said a few words just now, and his talk tells us exactly what Sesc does, especially in Rio de Janeiro. Well, he went to present the Mesa Brasil program, and in Rio de Janeiro, we have Mesa no Campo as well. We have family farmers, small farmers, and we were invited to take part in a forum on small companies, family agriculture and bioeconomy. It was, we had a group of people, a mission, Brazilian mission go with different people and people who have ideas and people representing the Ministry of Agriculture, and our president went as well because we really wished to contribute. And at that time, we met Oriana Romana. Oriana, you made a huge difference to us. Please be aware of this. After President Queiroz's presentation about the Mesa do Campo, Mesa in the countryside, this is a program that we started. Brazil is already preparing to adopt the same program across Brazil in the different states, 27 states, where family agriculture is very present and also very vulnerable because they're small farmers, small growers, and they would just go over food with their tractors or that could not be sold. Our country sees people going hungry. There are millions of people under the poverty line going hungry. So in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, we adopted this program. We're doing very well. And in 2019, we presented the program during our talk. Oriana is a great professional, and I met her and was able to talk to her. She is a very, very important professional, and her work is very important. She looked at us and she said, this project is very important, and she expressed very positive considerations. We felt very encouraged with your words, Oriana, when you told us that this project can be deployed in any country where there is hunger. There are many countries and many people who are still facing hunger on our planet. So, Oriana, I'd like you to know that that day your words were extremely encouraging. You said we must go ahead. It was as if you were saying we should go ahead and fight against food waste and hunger. We invited you to come to our country then, and it hasn't yet been possible to see you here personally, but we will receive you with great love and affection when you do come. But you are with us here in some way. You are in Brazil and you're contributing, and you will contribute with your talk as you did that day when you encouraged us and you discussed and reflected with us, making suggestions about so many things that you had to tell us. Oriana, what I'd like to say is that you are very welcome. You're a very special person and a professional person who is really needed. Welcome, Oriana. Oriana, now the floor is yours. Oriana, congratulations, Regina. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Pia and Regina, for these kind words. It is really much more than I could ever expect as welcoming remarks. I'm flattered and honored to be here and to keep contributing to this very, very important theme: hunger, food waste. I mean, this is really the basis on which everybody holds in terms of not only food security and nutrition, but really in terms of efficient use of resources. When we talk about food, we talk about land, we talk about water, we talk about energy, and there are incredible impacts in economic, social, and environmental terms. So this is a very complex thing that deserve increasing attention. And I'm very happy to be able to contribute to this discussion now. And in order to contribute concretely, I would like, if you allow me, to share a brief presentation. Let's see if I can share my screen, through which I would like to share some of the results of our report on the circular economy in cities and regions, focusing in particular on the role of circular food. But let me go step by step, just introducing the OECD program on the circular economy in cities and regions, because I think that the three pillars on which this program is based may be somehow of use also for your initiative, and I'm looking very much forward to collaborating even further, because the first thing that we do is learning. You know, we have several cities that contributed to this report on which I will be sharing, I will be talking now. 50 cities all around the world, but also specific case studies, for example, in Sweden, in Spain, in the Netherlands, in the United Kingdom, in Estonia. We're now working with Ireland, with Italy. And it's important to see how on several issues and several themes, countries or cities are moving towards their circular economy system. And I will show you now that food is always a part of these circular economy system. So the first is learning. The second is sharing. And here you have the roundtable on the circular economy in cities and regions. That is a networking platform of public, private, and non-for-profit sector. And the last is also measuring, because we need data, we need measuring framework, because sometimes it's not possible to improve what we cannot measure. So we know that there are not perfect indicators whatsoever, but nevertheless, we have to consider the need of data, the need of targets in order to move towards those targets and to measure progress. And this is what we also do within this program. Now, moving into the content of my presentation and sharing the results of this study that you may find online, and I will be happy to share the links to the report and to the other material that may be of use for you. I just would like to share three messages. The first message is that cities are and will be major food consumers. So focusing on the local level is very important also to reach what Regina just mentioned, the Sustainable Development Goals. From several studies, we saw that more than 100 out of the 169 targets will not be possible to be reached without a local action. So it is important to focus on territorial policies that will be looking on where people live, will be living in the future, and what kind of mega trends, for example, climate change, urbanization, population growth, will be facing, and the effect that these will have in terms of food. What is the picture? The picture is that already 80% of food is consumed in cities. The already projections show that 80% of food will be consumed in cities by 2050. 1/3 of this food is wasted. When we look at how food is produced, then we have to keep into account land use, water use. 70% of water is used for agricultural purposes, and there are economic losses in terms of food losses and waste that would account at $680 billion. So it's a it's huge when we think in terms of the impact, in terms of economic losses, in terms of environmental impact as well. The second message is that even though there are initiatives in place, the circle is not yet closed. There is much more to do when we want to close the loops when it comes to food management, from production to distribution and transport to consumption to the ultimate phase that would transform food waste into new resources to be put back in the circle. What we have seen is that among the cities that we have been working with, and as I said, there were more than 50, 37% of those have circular economy initiatives in place. This means, for example, strategies, roadmap, long-term visions. And in 50% of the cities that we surveyed, this long-term vision is not yet in place. When they're not in place, it means that there are a number of fragmented projects that can produce, of course, a very positive impact, but they're not impact at scale. What we need to do through the circular economy, and look at this data, 65% of surveyed cities include food in their strategies. If cities and regions have a long-term strategies, all these different initiatives can converge towards the same aim. So it is important to be coordinated. It is important to generate positive impact due to a range of initiatives that have a common goals. So it is important to collaborate across the stakeholders, because the circular economy and circular food is a shared responsibilities, and we need to have a long-term view to establish concrete targets to be reached. Now, there are several strategies in place that, for example, look at these four type of actions that you can see on the right-hand side of the slide. First, local production. There are many cities, like, for example, Guelph in Canada, that are really concentrating on enhancing local food production to, for example, reduce environmental impact due to transport, and also to make sure that urban agriculture can be a way not so much to provide food security, because it depends on the scale, but also to have some other effects, like, for example, carbon capture. And this is also the case of the cities of Brussels in Belgium. There are many initiatives in terms of food waste reduction. For example, the city of Groningen in the Netherlands, they started what they call a food battle challenge that was meant to raise awareness across citizens on how to avoid food waste. Redistribution of food is something that we saw very much in the UK. For example, in London, there is a sustainable restaurant network that they redistribute food waste, surplus food waste, as well as in Toronto, a program that is called Urban Harvest Program. They redistribute surplus food to food banks. And then, of course, there is a transformation of organic waste, also derived from food, into new products that could be fertilizers. And this is important because it makes the links between urban and rural linkages. When we think about cities, it's not just cities in terms of the urban core, but we have to think of where this food is coming from, and usually it's outside the skirt of cities. So taking into account this relation between the urban and the rural area is very important. Now, there are several obstacles that have to be taken into account when it comes to put in place the circular economy, and also including a circular food system that would, first of all, aiming at reducing food waste. Second, make sure that resources are used in the most efficient way to produce waste, and also that this can create a regenerative urban system. But of course, there are many obstacles to reach this system. And as you can see from here, and this is related to the circular economy in general, not only to food, the last of the problem are the technical solutions. Technical solutions exist. The problem is how to implement them, how to make sure that there is an enabling environment whereby regulation is conducive to circular economy, there is the appropriate financing system, there are no cultural barriers, you can have collaboration across stakeholders, for example, farmers that were mentioned by Regina before this presentation. So there is a governance system that should be put in place. And this is basically my third message and last. The solution is the system. We cannot think in silo. We have to make sure that this kind of transition from a linear to a circular economy becomes business as usual. It becomes an economic system. So what to do in order to get this, achieve this goal? It's important to promote, facilitate, and enable the system. How cities and regions can promote a circular economy? They can, for example, establish a long-term vision, but they can also promote a cultural circular economy transition. It is important to get everybody on board, from citizens to producer of food to distributor of food. This is a system. It's not just something that is decided from a government, but it requires really a shared responsibility. Cities and regions can be facilitators, and this means to coordinate across the levels of government. Brazil is a federal country. You have core responsibilities shared by federal, state, and the municipal level. So coordination across these levels of government are very much needed to go towards this system approach, as well as policy coherence. We mentioned that when it comes to food, any agricultural policy, so water policy, energy policy, waste policy will have an important role to play. Stakeholder engagement, I repeated several times, and also appropriate scale. And finally, enablers. We have to make sure that the local government and national government have the right regulation in place, financing to compensate and to create incentives, but also building capacity, support innovation, and last but not least, to create these data and assessment monitoring framework. Now, I will stop here, but of course, I'm happy to respond to any questions you may have. Here you have my email address in case you wish to contact me and get in touch further. I would like also to tell you that on the 22nd of October at the OECD, we will organize a webinar on localizing food policies, which will include circular food waste. I'm happy to share further details, and that we are looking closer and closer to this important and key theme of circular food. So you can expect further work in the future on this by the OECD and further evidence. So I hope we can keep in touch for the next step of this very important aspect of the circular economy, which is circular food. Thank you very much for your attention.
Oriana, muito obrigada pelas suas palavras.
Thank you very much for your presentation, for the invitation for the 22nd of October, and we will really be in touch. There is no doubt about it. As you've said, the whole world has to be connected to this initiative, must bear this situation in mind, the hunger. We have to struggle against wasting food. And you have also very precisely mentioned in a few minutes what we need to do as citizens of the world. So thank you very much for your kindness. Thank you very much for welcoming our invitation. It was a beautiful explanation. We are going to be in touch. You are very important professional. You are highly collaborative. And we know that our institution has a lot to bring to the table as well. So we will be in touch with everybody who is fighting the same battles. Bia, your turn. Well, I also would like to thank Oriana. It was an excellent presentation and many synergies with our project and with the Sesc project. And before saying goodbye, there is one question that I'd like to ask you. After everything you have seen from our organization, Sesc, how do you see the possibility of a publication like the one you've shown us about different regions and countries that should encompass? Could it be presenting what our project does in Brazil? Do you think that would be feasible? And could you help us with that? Maybe we bring in Mesa to the OECD, sorry, because that would be a very important exchange to us. So if you think that's something that's feasible, I will be launching the challenge and we would count on your help for this mission Mesa Brasil OECD. How do you see that?
Much, Bia. I think this is a very interesting proposal, and we should definitely talk about more about this opportunity. As I said, we're looking very, very closely to the issue of food, localizing food policies and circular food. So we will be looking for case studies. We will be producing a new report. We are starting with this webinar on the 22nd of October to kick off the project. So indeed, there is room for further collaboration, and we look very much forward to
Wonderful. Ok, perfeito, Regina, tá lançado o desafio.
So, Regina, that's perfect. Let's go for it. Thank you very much, Regina, once more. Congratulations, I was honored to be part of this panel and of this event, which is a game changer, in my opinion.
Muito obrigada, pessoal. Que painel agradável.
Thank you, everyone. What a great panel. We've heard from a very important institution and other very important institutions here in Brazil. Now we're going to carry on with our program. We're going to have another panel now, the panel on Will We Meet Sustainable Development Goal 12.3. The panelists will talk about the reduction of food waste in retail and how to reduce loss along the production and supply chains. I would like to invite the assistant representative for the FAO Brazil program in Gustavo Chianca, Professor Alessandra da Silva Pereira from Unirio, and Professor Daniela Frauzi of the Pesan Network and Fiocruz Brasilia, and Nadia Veloso as our moderator. She is the regional project coordinator of FAO Brazil. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Bia, Eliana, all our colleagues who are taking part. It really is a pleasure to be moderator here on this panel and to talk about take part in such an important dialogue, with very qualified, skilled people. They will tell us their perspectives, and we will think about this drop per capita in retail and the reduction of loss in waste in consumption. This panel ought to be very informal. We should be able to have a very agreeable chat, and we can be here till midday. The idea is for everyone to feel very calm and talk calmly, and at the same time participate in the allotted time. We want to have the best debate possible this morning. To this end, we have as our very special guest Gustavo Scianca. He is the assistant representative for the program, FAO Brazil program. And we have with us the coordinating professor of the nutrition course in Unirio, Professor Alessandra da Silva Pereira. We also have Daniela Prozzi with us. She is a professor and she represents Fiocruz Brasilia and the PISA network. All these people, thanks to their activities, professional activities, and all their knowledge, they will have a dialogue with us. Of course, we won't be able to talk about everything, but we'll talk about the main points. Each person will have 10 minutes for their talk, to talk about their experience in general, how they see things at the moment in terms of the subject at hand, and also with Bia's permission and the organizer's permission, Monica's, I would like to be able to talk about school food at the moment in terms of food waste now, so that we see things in what is happening in schools. And then there'll be something else. There's a surprise, and you'll be very interested to hear what we're going to produce. But at the end, the idea is to give very important messages around the goal 12.3, which is to reduce food waste per capita in the retail and food loss after harvest in the regions and the cities. Now, I have the pleasure to call upon Gustavo Scianca, who will start. And afterwards, we'll have Professor Alessandra Pereira, and afterwards, Professor Daniela. Thank you very much, Gustavo. The floor is yours. Good. Thank you, Naja. Good morning. Good morning to everyone who is taking part. I'd like to thank SESC for the invitation and congratulate SESC for the excellent event that has been prepared. FAO has great pleasure to take part, because this kind of event is the kind that, has centers around topics that are priorities for the FAO. And so we're here to take part, and very willingly. Good morning, Nadia. Good morning to my colleagues around the table, Professor Alexandra and Professor Daniela Frozzi. Good morning. I prepared a presentation that is brief so that we can start an exchange on the topic. Now, just a moment, please. I'm sorry, I need to plot my presentation on the screen. Can you see it? Yes, we can see it. Can you please zoom in a bit? Thank you. Is that better? Okay. Yes, perfect. Right, so I'd like to start my talk. And the topic, food waste and food loss, is very important for today's society. Today, need to place it in its context. The colleague who spoke before from the OECD gave an excellent talk, and I think her talk was a compliment to mine, or mine a compliment to hers. We need to place this topic in a context. The SDG 12.2 is connected with zero hunger, SDG 2, and so poverty, and so there are many things that are linked. And I would like to talk about the dimension of food waste and food loss, and by talking about food security. Now, here I'd like to talk about food security. This topic also includes food loss, and we work on this topic across 4 dimensions. How do we eat when we can physically do so and produce, when there is a production, when there is economic access and physical access to the food reaches close to where we are. We need the right infrastructure to have the food to reaching us, and especially if we have economic access, we have income, we can buy it in a supermarket, so that we can buy food in the supermarket. And also we have the use of the food. The food needs to be healthy, and it has to be used in a safe way so that we can feed ourselves and stay healthy and safe. Food health is very important. So we need to think of these dimensions. We need the production, we need to have access and use food in a healthy way. How does the UN, and it's very important to talk about this, classify food insecurity across the world? In 3 types, but there are 2 main ones. We have extreme hunger, which is when the person spends at least 1 day without having things to eat. It's not through an option, a religious choice, or the idea of going on a diet. This is a situation that the family, a child, whoever finds themselves in, they don't know what they're going to eat. There isn't anything to eat, and they spend the whole day without eating. Then that's an extreme hunger. Then we have moderate situation, which is when people manage to eat at least once a day, but the foods that they have are very often not healthy food, that nutritionally and in terms of the quantities are lower than people can have. So that having been said, I'd like to show you this graph that sums up this first part about food insecurity across the world. This graph it reflects hunger across the world. On the top, you see the number of people who are going through extreme hunger, who do not eat at least once a day. And then below, you see the percentage of people who go hungry in the world. So what do we see? And the FAO is a UN organization, UN agency, and as a UN agency, it was created 75 years ago, right after the Second World War. Its main objective was to guarantee food security across the world. So the main area of work is hunger, food, healthy food. And so we always work on this and trying to support governments to create initiatives and processes to eradicate this great evil, hunger. So since 2005, over 10 years ago, the world has increased its population. And if we follow the graph here, in the blue and the one below, we show that there has been a constant drop in over 10 years of people who are hungry in the world. So the population has grown, and there's been a drop in the number of people who go hungry. But what happened? We see that as from 2014 and 2015, this decreased. We were happy in many meetings, in SES meetings as well. Before 2015, I was very proud. I'd talk about circular economy, the production of food, incentives to family agriculture, local products, and income distribution programs. These were bringing food security and giving creating a drop in hunger. But as from 2015, before the COVID crisis, we see that in this graph that there was a stagnation and an increase, a light increase, and then suddenly with COVID, a great increase. We see that there are 3 C's and 1 D. Climate. In our region, the climate impact isn't that great, but we see that in Central America and the Andes, there is quite a lot of impact in the production of events. Now, this is basically linked to Africa, the African region, and some regions in Asia where there are great impacts of climate change, but they're reaching us either through a lot of rain, a lot of sunshine. We see also a great number of people migrating from the countryside to the cities. So they stop producing food and they go to cities going after food, and they have no income. Another C has to do with conflict. Our conflicts have brought great problems of food insecurity across the world. Now, we've found this in Europe. Since 2014, there has been a great number of people trying to migrate to Europe, crossing borders, also running away from conflict. Because the conflicts create hunger as well. And the third C is COVID. COVID there was already a serious situation before, and then suddenly there's been a great impact on income, and people so have less access, physical access to food. In Brazil, we produce a lot of food, more than we can consume, but there is hunger. So income. So that is a problem in terms of income. And D has to do with inequality in Portuguese that begins with D instead of I. So this is the news we have around food insecurity and the situation of hunger across the world. And we need to work on this. And food loss and waste is included in this. So this is some data. We see that there is between 720 and 811 million people. These are not exact statistics of people, well, 720 to 811 million people who go hungry. That was in 2020 across the world. This has to do with people who don't have enough to eat at least once a day. 2 billion people across the world are overweight and obese. So hunger and obesity today, especially between women and children in the low-income bracket, are 2 sides of the same coin. And this shows us that when you have income, but you don't have enough to buy healthy food, you buy unhealthy food more and more, and this brings obesity. So we have a population, and Brazil is an example of this, especially in the northeastern region. There are more children who are obese and poor women who are obese than malnourished. So to speed up a little bit, because I think that I am going to go beyond my allotted time, we have a subject that, I'd like to talk about has to do with loss and waste. What is loss? Loss has to do with what is lost in production. Very often the farmer who goes to harvest doesn't know how to harvest properly. If the worker is doing manually, there might be some difficulty, or with machinery, there might be, the machinery might not be well calibrated, and also there can be loss all the way to the market. all the distribution centers. Now, the great problem is waste, really food waste in our present society. The losses are important, but the waste is terrible. The richer and the more developed a society or country, the greater the waste. Now, to go along, Gustavo, I'm coming to the end. Well, we have three dimensions of food waste and loss: an economic, a social, and an environmental dimension. Now, what does this result in? I'm going to conclude by saying this. Food waste and loss today across the world. Well, we have 931 million tons of food that are sold to homes, in retail, restaurants, and other food services that are wasted. 931 million tons. Approximately 14% of the food produced for global consumption each year are lost between the harvesting and the wholesale market. And in terms of loss, well, this has to do with the FAO reports. The loss is about $1 billion in terms of environmental costs and social costs. So, economic costs and environmental and social costs. So the costs of food loss and waste are estimated at $1 trillion a year, rather, 700 billion environmental costs. Now, there is an impact on the environment. Obviously, 8 to 10% of the global greenhouse gases emissions today come from loss, not just food production, loss as well. Food goes bad, decomposes, and emit an enormous amount of CO2 and methane into the environment. Energy, the packaging today, all that. And also in terms of environmental impact, we have 1.4 billion hectares of land is used for the production of lost food or wasted food. So that is another figure. I'm going to leave my presentation with you so that you can have to look at, and I'd like to just broach a few other subjects. I'm coming to an end. Food waste and loss is very important. It encompasses different dimensions, and we need to do some things. We have the challenge of the 12.3 SDG. Will we be able to meet it? Well, one of the important subjects is the UN International Year of Fruit and Vegetables. We are talking about this subject of food waste and loss, and this international year is the year in which we try and raise awareness about eating fruit and vegetables. This is important food for the population. It is produced by family farmers that allow for a circular economy. We talked about the circular economy and the local economy as well. And besides this, there is a very important impact. So to support this kind of initiative is very important in society. And the International Year gives us a moment for reflection. And I'd like to conclude by saying, I started showing you insecurity data, food insecurity data. And these data have been reported ever since the FAO was founded 75 years ago. There was a publication published once a year by the FAO about food insecurity across the world by country. This publication gained in importance, and it was done by 5 UN institutions, the WHO, the WFP, UNICEF, and FIDA, and the World Food Program, as I said. And last year, hunger and food systems, these subjects were so important that the publication, it wasn't just done by the 5 institutions. Now it has become a UN publication, and the UN Secretary General, before it was launched in Rome in the FAO, at the FAO headquarters, now it is launched in New York. There is a meeting before the UN summit. The heads of state hold this important moment for the launching of the publication. This draws attention to hunger across the world. Now, we need to change our food system, not just in terms of the way of producing, but consuming and how we see food and food waste. So that was what I wanted to say, Naja. Thank you very much. I really had to summarize everything, but during the debate, I'll be able to go into greater depth. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gustavo. It was really interesting because there was a lot of data that had a lot to do with what Oriana said in her talk, and I think that it was good to see this review. And now, this panel is extremely wealthy in information. We have an international organization, we have the academia, we have Fiocruz and Daniela, who is with us. So I'd like to say that we're going to have with us Professor Alessandra da Silva Pereira, and she's going to talk to us about from the academic point of view. Professor Alessandra?
Good morning, Naja. Good morning to Dr. Gustavo and Daniela. It's my pleasure to be part of this panel in such an important debate that was announced yesterday. So I'd like to congratulate Sesc too for the organization. When I got the question, I thought, oh my God, how difficult it is. And why is that? I wish I could be more optimistic. When people ask me if we are going to reduce the waste of food up to 2030. But the fact remains that in a crisis, an economical, sanitary, and environmental crisis, and that added to the current practices, some of them which we have already largely debated, we have alarming numbers for the future. And actually, what we've found is that it might increase the loss, the global food loss, up to 1/3 instead of reducing it by half. So this could aim at $2 trillion. So it's a huge impact, not only in food safety, but also environmental impact and economical ones. But, I'm hopeful because at the same time, we've seen different initiatives and we have seen people mentioning things either on the chat or on the conferences, and we can identify a bunch of institutions that are willing to fight for that. So I do believe there are new paths to be taken, paths that are already there, strategies that have been implemented everywhere. Mesa Brasil is one of them. There is Mesa no Campo as well. The first conference we heard about circular economy. So those are important initiatives that we could follow when it comes to Brazil's situation. So I'm pacing it up because of the time constraints, but I think the first step to reach the goal is to think about considering legal mechanisms about the matter. And we should understand that as a national policy, a state policy, not government one. So the same thing happened at the beginning of the year 2000, because it would allow us to go on with those programs in a more effective way. So I'm going to mention those previous programs later. So we have over 30 bills on National Congress, and one of them is about national policies implementation. And there are others for redistributing waste food and also for food donation. So we just have to organize things in an urgent manner in order to put together programs and laws. And we were discussing this law, the 14,016, and that was sanctioned. But we must bear in mind also that this happened during the pandemic, so it was an exceptional event, and therefore, in order to make it long term, we should be discussing it much further. And Gustavo has raised an issue that is a very serious issue in Brazil about nutrition and hunger. Numbers are really troublesome. They are really scaring. People do not have food on their tables. And when we consider fighting hunger, we have to also highlight the human right to food safety. And I'd like to bring it on because otherwise we would consider that that's something to use other products that are not healthy enough. So this has to do with the structured policies and the organized national policies that will bring us to new path so that we can follow pursuing this goal of reducing waste. And that, in the year 2019, there was a council that was cancelled here, and that was the entity in charge of implementing these laws related to food security. And one of the goals is the support every step of the way of the food system so that the human right to the adequate food should be maintained and provided. So, and also to reduce waste and food loss, as we have first said. We must understand also, Najla, that when we are discussing reduction, waste, we are talking about integrated measures, multi-sectoral ones. And in practical terms, it's difficult, institutionally speaking, to implement, to put them into action. And that's why we should be looking for a legal framework works that could do wonders for us with regards to that. So we should implement intersectoral and multidisciplinary measures because first we need to understand what the problem really is. So that's why the mapping is so important in Brazil. For instance, which methodology is being used? We need new methodologies and instruments that can generate numbers and KPIs that are comparable to other countries. And we also must identify in which part of the food chain we need to act in a more urgent manner. I was very happy because yesterday somebody mentioned a Latin American initiative that is working on that matter, and the universities should be a part of the process too. Another issue has to do with the investments, obviously. We have to consider research, technological innovation, and so on. And why? And then I go back to the point in which I said I was not optimistic. Because in Brazil, just the opposite is taking place right now, We do not have investment, but it's worse than that because they are cutting our funds everywhere. So, 10 minutes is really a short amount of time. And education, when it comes to being implemented to support educational campaigns, to reduce waste and losses and so on, we are contemplating the whole chain from the producer to the consumer. So Gustavo mentioned it very clearly. We are living an era of consumption. We changed our relationship to food. So maybe we should go back to the old way of feeding ourselves, because that would help us a lot when it comes to feeding our families. And we also need to strengthen, when we are discussing loss reduction or waste reduction, we should focus also on the already existing programs. We do have one program in Brazil that has legal mechanisms that deal with the family agriculture, with other instances in which we could strengthen such initiatives, such as PA, PNI, and others. And not only those national programs, but we mention school food, but also we should be considering the public institutions feeding as a whole. And also we should be strengthening other parts of our chain. There are some key tasks being carried out, and the small producers, they are suffering due to lack of innovation and lack of technologies. So also we should be thinking about virtual networks and virtual platforms that would help the small producer, and also to work on reducing losses and reducing waste is key if we are facing such a situation of hunger, for instance, misery, poverty. Well, but that's not enough. There are some actions that need to be taken as soon as possible. The sooner the better, so that we can achieve our SDGs. But that's about the food waste. But when we talk about hunger, hunger cannot wait. People who are hungry cannot wait. People who are hungry cannot wait. And so who is feeding such a disease? It's the social inequality. That's the lyrics of a song I'd like to mention here. So we have been fighting the good fight there, and we are trying to implement practical and pragmatic actions in order to ease hunger. And we'll be speaking more about it during the debate. Thank you, Professor, PhD, Alessandra. We are colleagues in different dialogue instances, and it's very important to try and think and use those elements she brought us as food for thought. Oriana and Gustavo, Alessandra, they all mentioned such topics. And now we are going to be listening to Daniela. She's going to bring the scientific option to us, the scientific view. And that's the perspective we aim to create more hope, because there are things that can be done, and we are aware of that. So I'll pass the floor to Daniela. Thank you, Najila. It's a pleasure to get to know you and to be here with my peers, Alessandra and our dear Gustavo, and to bring such an urgent matter to the table. It's urgent now, but it has been urgent for a long time. We have not discussed waste and the losses of the system, of the linear system, that's very much unrelated to a circular economy, as Oriana so brilliantly introduced to us. So we That's mankind. We are dealing with an ethical crisis as well, the planet as a whole, I should say. And this ethical crisis has to do also with food security. COVID-19, that has also impacted us all. It has come as a huge threat, and avoiding this reflection to think the planet as a.
Eu gosto de colocar, viu, Nájila, quando a gente pensa a questão da segurança alimentar nacional, essa forma sistêmica de conseguirmos visualizar o que significa.
A systemic way of saying what it means to eat on a planet. Because and it's our only planet. Some recent reports and some scientific reports have also shown us that if we are going to keep up the same degree of consumption and the same kind of economy that we have now through the capitalist system, in fact, there was a promise where people would all be included. And we're waiting for the capitalist system to do that. And we believe in the process that the organized civil society, in agreement through dialogue with the other actors in society and governments as well, how in this light Sesc sees itself. I'd like to say that Mesa Brasil is a player in the public policies in terms of food public policies in Brazil. I was able to analyze in all the food bank, the role of food banks in Brazil, and food banks are a participant in the whole process. And when we think of the food waste and food loss, we need to think of processes that create less impact on nature. When we talk about nutritional impact, we have a right to have adequate and appropriate food. In our Brazilian constitution, I'd like to remind you of Article 6, on which we talk about the right to food, as has been mentioned by Alessandra. I would also like to remind you of Article 225, which talks about the right to nature. This is in the Brazilian constitution. How wonderful. I'd like to have a brief pause so that I can read what the article says that is in our constitution, our federal Brazilian constitution, national constitution. It establishes that everybody has the right to a balanced, ecologically balanced environment, a healthy way of living, and the government, the state needs to preserve the quality for the present and future generations. So we do not lack the rights, because they're in our constitution. Our constitution is very wealthy in terms of concept, and I have been part of the Conselho, and with different partners, we left the hunger map, and it really happened. And we know that school food, the program that you're going to tell us about very shortly, I'm very curious to know what it is we're going to talk about around that topic, was a great part responsible for working on food as a human right, and also as food as a right in terms of nature. The rights based on original peoples, indigenous peoples, the Quilombola peoples have taught us about respect for nature. the place where we can plant and harvest without loss, without waste, because everything is focused on the respect for nature and the environment. And the Constitutional Conseil also shows respect for nature, because it says the access has to be quantitative, qualitative, and that shows respect for health promoting practices, respect for the environment, and also sustainability, social, economic sustainability, and environmental sustainability. So we have all the elements and everything, well, enough of these things in Brazil, so that these things can be provided in Brazil. What we're living through is an ethical crisis in capitalism. Marta Sé is going to say in her last publication exactly this: how can we develop without leaving anyone behind? Perhaps we need to go back to Bruno Latour and see how we can develop the planet without leaving nature behind, without leaving nature behind as a subject, because nature is a subject, because but mankind is not listening to its silenced shout for help. Now, as Gustavo showed us, he showed us data around climate change and other natural impacts. Nature, when it shouts, it is already reflecting destruction. So we need to work and discuss the loss and waste related to the agricultural and food systems, economic systems that we want to strengthen. The economic policies wanted to strengthen the subsistence, and it did strengthen a program that helped or supported the small producer. The Pensan Network, a Pensan Network in Brazil, reveals that 19 million Brazilians are going hungry. Amongst those 19 million Brazilians who are going hungry, the greatest percentage are in the countryside. This means that the countryside public policies, the rural policies that support the small producers, well, these reflect extreme poverty. In Brazil, we do have people who are homeless, who we can see on the streets in pockets of poverty. It helps these people a lot. But we also have rural poverty, and rural poverty is perverse because the land is there, and very often there are waterways and water resources in other places. There aren't these resources, but we have small producers working of the seeds, handling the soil and harvesting. And we need strong family agriculture in Brazil. We need strong family agriculture in Brazil to bring us, that can bring us hope. How can we promote hope? These people know how to reduce food waste and food loss. When we analyze the systems, Walter Balick talks about this. If you want to watch the other roundtables that Sesc has done, he's been part, you'll see that the smaller agriculture, the local agriculture, the small farmers produce the greatest reduction of loss and waste, because it focuses on the human side of things. When agriculture doesn't focus on that, but on a process that is remote, that is unrelated to the... I love Robert Castell. He works on the metamorphoses that occur in societies when societies become distant from mankind. When we start understanding social exclusion, and social exclusion is the worst face of inequality. What we saw yesterday in the papers, people going into the bones and lorries. That's not the Brazil that we want. We don't want to see that image again. That is not what we want for our country. And when we think in this way, we understand that we need to consider our engagement from the ethical point of view, not just in terms of institutional research on food, but also in terms of the organized civil society and the struggles that we need to carry out. And for this, we need to remember that obesity and hunger are fought in the same way, against in the same way, with food that is appropriate, that is nutritionally balanced and emotionally significant. So we mustn't talk about just social cultural aspects in terms of nature and food. Or rather, we must consider this, I'm sorry. All this is very important when we talk about food waste and loss in Brazil. Thank you very much. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you for your excellent talk. Actually, the three were excellent talks. You were very good at mentioning the main points, and I would like to say now, bearing in mind all that has been said, I would like to ask a question to the three of you. This would be our contribution. The question is, considering all the experience, all the dialogue, and all the actions and the recommendations that you raised, what would you tell us? What three lessons did you learn from your perspective where you work? And what three lessons would you consider relevant so that we can reach this goal and can answer yes to the question around whether we will reach the SDG goal 12.3? Gustavo? Thank you, Najla. I don't know if there are three lessons or there are many more, but there is a central point. The central point around food waste and loss has a lot to do with the knowledge that we have about the food, about the situation whereby people go hungry, knowledge we have around the environmental context. The loss brings about an environmental impact, the use of water resources and and also there's the food that is wasted could be on the market. So that was wasted could be on the market. So we need to be aware. We need to raise awareness in terms of consumption. Some reports or research shows us, and I'm going to repeat what I said in my talk, in the richest countries, waste is higher than in poorer countries because there is more available in the supermarkets. You have a higher income, and our consumer society means that we buy more than we need. So there is a need for raising awareness, that things in the supermarket, an integrated campaign, the person who's selling and the person who's buying the product. So this is important, and that is why the FAO works with advocacy and also disseminating this data. Another aspect has to do with the legislation that can help us against food waste and food loss. There are many, many important experiences in terms of food banks. The Sesc has been through a lot of experience around the use of this food that that is perishable and that you can promote. And another aspect is the circular economy. In other words, we should encourage in a very robust way local food production, respect for the different food habits of local populations. This means agriculture that is closer, usually that's small agriculture, with a cleaner production, urban agriculture. All this means lower transportation costs. This is very important. It's very important to raise awareness about this. Of course, there are so many more things that can be discussed. It's not just the farmer that is close that has to produce. He needs to know how to use and handle, store the product. And so there's the whole chain and a series of aspects around food waste and loss. But we need to be optimistic. We are going along an important path and moving along. Food waste and food loss was not discussed really in Brazilian society, and now it is now going into the international agenda, onto the pact around the change of the food system across countries. So this means we are moving forward so that we can have a better future, we can have a better society, and we can reach SDG 12.3. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very, very interesting to hear your perspective from the point of view of an international organization. I'd like to ask the same question to Professor Alessandra. Thank you, Nadia. It's a good question because I started my other talk sounding slightly more pessimistic. And this question allows us to provide examples and actions that have been carried out and show that we do have very positive actions. In the past few years, we have been able to work in a very positive way in reducing food insecurity, nutritional insecurity, and reducing food waste and loss. Now, first of all, it's very difficult to sum everything up in just three lessons, but I'd say the first thing is education. Education can transform, change. We need to invest in raising awareness in education from a very early age, starting in childhood. We need to focus on an integrated food waste and food loss policies. Now we're working on Saleia 21. Nadia knows it. Saleia 21 Brazil is a partnership between Brazil, Denmark, and China. We carried out a pilot action with two institutions, with Gisele and Bia from EU and Professor João Acefete, who is bringing robotics so that we can fight against food waste and loss in schools. And we can see promising results already. And who knows, we can broaden these actions. Now, extend these actions. I believe that the educational points of view will be transformational. Another point is to give a new meaning to food. We need to stress our way of feeding. In the past few years, we have seen that people go for convenience food, and major industry is taking a big role, and so we have perhaps less balanced food now. Last of all, to talk about the third, this has to do with having legislation, public policies on food waste and loss. I would like to highlight that we have the PNAI that has to be stressed and remembered. It has brought advances, especially in the past 3 decades. They're very important changes in national terms so that we can reach food security and nutritional security. It deals with actions for around meals, and it also brings a respect for local habits, food habits, regional aspects, and we need to think about starting from scratch strategies so that we can look, and we're also looking for more regional habits. We have good examples, good actions taking place, and I believe that we can be inspired by these examples so that we can reach our goals in terms of reducing food waste and loss. Thank you, Alessandra. And now I'd like to ask the same question to Daniela. So the 3 lessons that you would leave with us from where you're standing now. Thank you very much. A great question. I believe, well, that I have worked in all this field, and I saw Brazil leaving the hunger map. I think right from 1945 we have the national program for food, school food, but it was from 2009 from the linking of the policies on acquiring food that we reached this phenomenon. When we included the small farmer. So I would like to highlight the PA, the program that is an agroecological program. It considers nature as a subject, man, woman as a subject. So the agroecological program was related to systems that left standing forests. So agroforest, agroecology. Something else that I consider to be very important is solidarity economy. This experience is similar to circular economy. Actually, there are many things in common. It happened in Brazil, so we do have this experience, and I think we have to bring back these experiences that actually still exist in Brazil. We need to stress this experience. Why is it important? But it considers human beings and places him or her at the center of the debate, both the political debate and the social debate, putting people as vulnerable groups, associations at the center. So this ethical and social justice dimension is very important. We need to see the type of agriculture, the type of economy that will bring about evolution for the human being. The last point, which I think is very important, is experience in social participation. Social participation is something that is in our constitution. It wasn't brought about by a single government, but yes, by governments that believe that social participation is the path for a dialogue with organized civil society. This also meant that Brazil left the hunger map. I don't think a government is good unless there is good dialogue with society, whereby society can criticize the government and help in creating common good. This requires humility and human values such as unity, generosity, solidarity. These aspects, these human values will bring about changes in our way of thinking and also our way of feeling, because we are human beings. And as David Breton taught us in the emotional anthropology study, that the human process of being in the world also needs to take into account the immaterial place of emotions. So I believe that with humility, we can change ways of living to always be able to protect the most vulnerable. And social participation for this is the best experience that I've seen in the past few years. It's the best experience on our agenda in Brazil in terms of food security. Very good. Thank you. I'd like to make use of this time now. After all these lessons, I'd like to take up again Beto Guedes' song where he says, when we come to September, now we're coming to the end of September, but we should have a vision. He says that we've cried a lot, that many have lost their way, but that even so, it's difficult to find a new song that brings us a sun that comes with spring. When I heard you, I thought, well, we know what the lessons are, but we don't seem to be able to learn. Now, I'd like to wrap up by saying the following. I'm not going to talk about the PNAI because there'll be a roundtable for that, but I'd like to draw your attention to something related to schools. What about the schools in this scenario? Very often I see that policies are taken in a broad sense. We talk about regulation, actions, and the different fronts on which we can act. And then I see that schools are, first of all, a space for information exchange that is very important. Now, why do I want to highlight this? Because if we do everything and we don't bring this to people, raise awareness, people will be deaf, they will be dumb, because they won't have the advocacy that Gustavo mentioned. It's very important. I look at my family. I see people in my family who are not aware of any of these things that we've raised. So I think this is very serious, and it really draws my attention. We produce an awful lot. I'm sure that we have production enough. Now, something else to do with schools. We have a space for exchanging knowledge. We need to improve these spaces so we can bring new ideas, new people, new mindsets that the youth have. And if we want to confront the food waste and loss and malnourishment, we need to improve our habits. As Gustavo said, the problem is waste, and waste has different aspects and has to do with consumption as well, and what we consume at home, what we eat in our kitchen, how we prepare our food, what we do with the scraps, and in schools, what we do with leftovers, not just with food, organic leftovers, also inorganic. So what are we building in terms of our culture in these spaces? I know that a lot of things are happening. I know Brazil from one end to the other. I have seen a lot, but I don't think we have placed schools in the place where they need to be. And last of all, I'd like to say that they are a space that is a collective space where people have an exchange. We have different actors and different social representatives. We have the state, the managers, you have the hierarchy, the state, the municipal, the state, whatever. And you have the teachers who are of essential importance in creating change and building a culture. I know that a lot of the chaos that we see has to do with a lack of a space for dialogue about modern and social issues at school. I have worked in different schools, and I know we have great potential. I know what is lacking. We need stimuli and knowledge to know how to turn these subjects that are so important into methodologies that can transform. So my message here is that we're very important, and we need to be seen as actors who are important actors in these changes, in these requirements for society. And we need to find out. It's no good just doing things in any way in schools. We need to think about education and all the different sides of this. And last of all, I'd like to say that in Brazil, in schools, there is food being provided. This is an important food chain, and besides being a player or having a role in transformation in all the school community, it also involves a complex system, because it goes from the planning of what is going to be provided for food, if it's going to be locally produced, if it's going to be processed, if they're going to just give milk and biscuits, or if they're actually going to take up what the food regulations say. These are choices, and this is something that unfortunately we cannot control 100%. But it is an important part in this chain. There are logistics that has to do with the food transportation, receiving and storage. There is the preparation of the food in schools. It can be done also through caterers or whatever. But it is important to make this program, this part of things, a space where we can raise awareness. And after this, there is something that's very important that has to do with disposal, what we do with what is left over. What do we have to do so that there are no leftovers? What things can we do in terms of monitoring the solid waste and non-solid waste use, and also to work in terms of working with all this and the human resources. Well, I don't want to take up more time. To really wrap up this time, Karen, I would simply like to ask each of our colleagues, each of the participants, wonderful participants that they were, to have a one last minute and give us a final farewell message, and then I'll just say one last phrase. Thank you, Karen.
Gustavo, your turn, please. Thank you very much, Najla. And I'd like to thank SESC and the event organizers as well. It has been a pleasure to be a part of this roundtable. And as a takeaway message, I think we have to be optimistic. The world is changing. We want to go deeper in such an important theme, because it's important not only for us, for our country that is right now facing a hunger situation, a food and safety situation, but for the whole world, globally speaking. And so that's it. Thank you, Najla. Congratulations to my peers. And Najla, thank you for the moderation. Thank you, Professor Gustavo. Now it's Professor Alessandra's turn. Well, yes, I also would like to repeat the thank you note to thank and congratulate SESC and the event organization. Najla, you were such an inspiration. I'd like to thank you. It was a privilege to be sharing this space with Danielle and Gustavo, people that are really engaged in changing the world. And as a takeaway message, I think we should be hopeful. We have actions that are being implemented. We are examples to follow, such as Mesa Brasil. So we know where to go. We know what the journey is. But we have to get together. We have to work together, and as a society, together with the government, civil society, private institutions, we have to go for it. The problem is huge, lots of challenge around it, and we cannot afford to be isolated. So let's go together, because it is difficult, but it is possible. Thank you, Alessandra. So beautiful what you said. Daniela, your turn. Right now, I just would like to reinforce the thank you. That's the biggest message, because we could say we are summing up here when we say we're thankful to the Sesc, to Nadia for such a beautiful moderation, for having the opportunity of listening to you as an educator and being an educator. I also like to think about Paulo Freire, Gustavo. They are all on the same profession. So people who are listening to us, they are educators as well. So I think, yes, we should nurture ourselves from this message from Paulo Freire, who created a verb to hope, a different kind of hoping, that is when to hope but struggling for it, to challenge the losses, and mainly to challenge dehumanization. You know, that we have to find a new way of living in our world. We have to be creating a sorority, a brotherhood, and to reinforce the human link so that we are able to produce peace and joint efforts and new ways of life that will save humanity. So it's such a poignant moment. I'm a very hopeful person. I'm an optimist. So I do believe that by carrying out several human dialogues, we are going to avoid dehumanization and we are going to get there. So 9 words for you, Karen. Knowledge, 9 topics actually. Knowledge, the complex chain, education as a possibility for changing the world, rescuing the food culture, the old food culture, to try and look for sustainable policies, to go back to national policies such as the PNAY, and also solidarity economy, circular economy, recover the ethics that used to guide us, and last but not least, social participation. And to finally close, I'd like to reinforce that I was very proud to be on this international forum. So I think that Mesa Brasil is wonderful. For years, I have been admiring the work you guys carry out. And there is a message that's not mine, but I think it's important. The minister of Barbados, she was in the United Nations Assembly, and she said, "Get up, stand up." Just like Bob Marley said, who is going to be standing up to fight for people's rights? And she said, "I don't want to come back here and say, I've warned you, but it's time to make it happen. We have to act, we have to guide people, because the more crisis we have, the more people that are starving, the worse the international system will worsen, will fragment it. So I borrowed the message from her because I thought it was very important to share it with you guys today. So we should go to a next level. We know it's okay to put diagnosis and reflection aside for now. We have to go on to try and reach the hands-on part of the process. And therefore, I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to strongly thank you. Those were brilliant talks, and they were very important. And I like to tell Karen that now the floor goes back to her. Thank you, Professor Najla. And of course, I also would like to thank you. It was a wonderful panel, very affectionate. I think that's what we need, to be discussing it in a very smooth manner. That was very important. Professor Najla, whenever I'm busy or I can't do something, I will ask you to do it for me, because you're amazing. Congratulations. It was awesome. Thank you. Guys, after such a wonderful roundtable, we have a wonderful forum. But at first, at the beginning, I asked them what were they hungry for, and some comments. I am hungry because for doing the right thing. And Tatiane, she said she's hungry for justice, for social justice. And somebody else is hungry for social inclusion. And Alessandra Pereira, yes, she has answered the same. She's hungry for social justice as well. So thank you very much, because you have said beautiful things. And I also would like to remind you that there is a new recipe book for Mesa Brasil that's going to be available on Sesc webpage as of the 16th of October. And there is high quality information. There are very good recipes, high quality nutrition recipes, and also their focus is to avoid waste when cooking. So now we are going to get some food, and we'll come back at 2 o'clock. This link is going to be closed now, and the other one is available on Sesc channel. So thank you, guys, and we see you soon. Bye.
Tchau, tchau, gente. Obrigada.
Tchau, gente.
Eu tenho fome de cidadania.
Muito obrigada pelo
Eu
compartilhamento.
tenho fome de ajudar.
Bom dia pra vocês.
Eu tenho fome de fazer a
Bom
diferença.
dia,
Eu
querida.
tenho fome
Tchau,
de levar
tchau.
esperança.
Prazer.
Eu tenho fome de inclusão.
O Mesa Brasil Sesc RJ agradece a todos que colaboram para que essa receita seja um sucesso diariamente. Juntos, adicionamos o nosso ingrediente mais importante, a solidariedade.
Tenho fome de brincar. Eu tenho fome de batata. Eu tenho fome de tomate. Eu tenho fome de feijão.